It's a long process. It involves approximately 49 years of obsessively watching science fiction films and TV shows and reading a lot of science fiction novels, plus being a bit of a World War I and World War II enthusiast, and taking all of that and then coming up with various ideas for ships that are sort of inspired by things that you've seen, things that you've read, things you know in the real world that fill in the various roles that we have in the game.
So typically we get an idea of what ships that we need to implement in the game, usually from Chris.
It can be anything from, we have a function that we need or a gameplay mechanic that we need in the universe. And we need a ship that will do that, salvage or mining or racing or courier or whatever.
We have that discussion. It's normally pretty lively. Oh, let's do this, let's do that. Let's have one of these. Let's have something with, the size of a planet, or or the size of a coffee cup, whatever. I mean, that's ridiculous, but that's a sort of spectrum that that these things sort of cover.
It's twofold. One side is the design requirements. So, like for instance, we go, okay, well, we need a ship that you can fight with, or we need a ship that you can mine with. We need a ship that you can carry cargo in, and then. So that's sort of the logical game side of it. And then there's the emotional side, which is like, if I'm thinking about what a ship, if I think about say a cargo ship or a fast cargo ship, well, perhaps I'm thinking about Serenity, or I'm thinking about the Millennium Falcon, right? And so you have an emotional attachment to those because you've seen them, say, on a film or a TV show, and it kind of reminds you of that. And so we balance a combination of the practical needs that we want to fill in from the game requirements with the sense of an emotional attachment. So it's not just purely, kind of cold, pragmatic science. It involves evoking ships or aircraft from the past, from the present day, or from fiction, whether they're spaceships or actual real aircraft. I mean, so a fair amount of our combat ships are really evocative of, say, aircraft that would be from World War II or later, or potentially stuff that you've seen on science fiction films or TV shows, and that's the overall kind of idea boiling pot that they come from. And then we sit down and we talk about what the role we want to fill. Okay, we need a single seat ship here. We need a medium ship or a large or a capital class ship, and then what the role the ship's going to do. And then that's where we start to throw out these ideas.
Once that's been decided, then it'll go to the design team. So John Crew, so basically him and his guys, they'll work up an initial brief.
Generally, we try and keep the ships. We know where they're going to get made at the end of the day based on the size of the ship. So larger ships tend to get made in the UK, smaller ships in LA. So it's always better to have the designer that did the original concept in the same studio as the ship that's making it, so they can help guide it. So that initially sort of dictates which studio it gets given to, and then myself or Kirk will then further narrow it down to a designer who has perhaps shown interest in doing that style of ship.
So we've divvied up the work between the LA and the UK studios as far as ship implementation is concerned regarding the tech design teams. Typically what we've done is we've divided them amongst the manufacturing lines. That works great. The art style for the ships can fall within the different studios' team structure as well. So the tech designer and the artist can work hand in hand, being right next to each other.
And then we would sort of go from there and would decide, okay, well, for this kind of ship, for our portfolio of manufacturers, what kind of, who do you think would do it? Which of the manufacturers are known for fast, or which manufacturers known for cargo ships? Which manufacturer do we feel like we haven't overloaded on? I mean, right now, if you look at our ship lineup, Aegeus is over-indexing as far as our ship manufacturers. But we look at it and go, okay, yeah, this, yeah, we would like, the Constellation's a great ship, but perhaps we want that sort of slightly more, I wouldn't necessarily say style over substance, but there is a little bit of it that you get with Origin, which is sort of that sense of a BMW or an Apple, in terms of sort of how it does its elegant design. Well, let's have a ship like that will be in the same area that the Constellation, because the Constellation is a really great ship. It works really well for a small group of friends to play together. In some ways, I think it's kind of perfect because 3-4 friends playing together is a pretty cool number, and it can take a few more than that. And if you don't have that many, it works pretty well with 2 or 1 even. So I think it's a great ship. But we don't have enough ships in that area, so we say, okay, and this is kind of where the 600i came from. We'd talked about having a Origin competitor for quite a while, but we felt like, yes, it was a good time to have that in the game, because yes, we have lots of single-seater ships that do a variety of things, although mostly combat, because that's some of the that's one of the earliest game mechanics that we had working in the game. But we generally go through and we try to say, okay, well, we need ships for these different areas and different classifications at different sizes, so you can progress.
So once we get the initial concept and the role from Chris, we decide where in the hierarchy of all the ships that particular ship lies, and then we figure out things like, okay, well, it needs to be really combat capable, or its role isn't specifically suited to that, so maybe it's a little bit more lumbering, but has a lot of armor and a lot of health. Or it's, we can forego all of that and say its main role is to travel from point A to point B really fast, foregoing safety, because that's that particular ship's role. Once we make those decisions, we can start figuring out, okay, what are the stats for the ship, and in that regard, figure out what are the items that we need to be able to fulfill those particular features and functions that a ship that we design to fill a particular role would have.
So we might have a ship that can carry X and has Y guns, and so we'll flip that around to create a sort of a polar opposite one of it, or create artificial weaknesses or strengths to differentiate them. We have a lot of ships that are averagely good across the board, so we want to push ships that are significantly better in some aspects, but you don't want those ships that are going to be the clear favourites to go to. They need to have a significant downside to them. So the people that just want the easy life, they can just pick nice easy ships that can just do it, and those that want to have a bit more engaging gameplay from it can pick those outlier ships that give that challenge.
Well, then it starts a bunch of questions. All right, so we have blank type of ship that we need. How big does it need to be? Is it a small ship? Is it a single player ship? Is it multi-crew? Is it a capital ship? Whatever. So a lot of discussions going round and round and round of trying to hone in on exactly sort of what type of ship it is. And usually it sort of will come down to the higher ups in design, and then ultimately Chris kind of getting presented with the idea of, hey, here's the type of ship that we want to make. What do you think? And then usually more feedback and notes, and iterate. And then finally they sort of hone in on, okay, so here's the ship as a design concept that we want to do. And then it gets passed on to art, who begin concepting it. And so they're doing form language and shapes. And usually narrative team will come in usually about that time, because they'll, if it hasn't already been decided, but then the question of who's manufacturing the ship will come in, because that will inform the art team as far as the kind of design language that they use and stuff like that.
The background, the fiction that we created for United Empire of Earth, and the setup of the universe that we have of Star Citizen is essentially, well, it's not essentially, it's definitely riffing off and inspired by actual, historical precedent. So, in the case of Star Citizen, it's sort of the peak years of the Roman Empire and its decline, with the UEE standing in for the Roman Empire, and the Vandals standing in for the Visigoths, and the Vandal and the Jean standing in sort of for the Ottoman Empire and the Far East. aspects, and the Banu for kind of North Africa, Middle East, Barbary Coast, and in some ways I feel like you connect to it better. It feels more real to you if you sense a portion of it that connects to something that you know, whether, like I said, it's that you've seen in fiction over the years, reading books or watching movies or TV, or in real life, like a B-17 Fortress bomber or something like that. And so that's the overall sort of big picture of how we kind of come up with the idea, and then once we've sort of honed it in, various folks throw in their sort of ideas into the hat. So depending on a Kirk or a John Crew or Todd or Tony or Ben Lezick did a lot of this, especially in the early days. Would say, well, how about this ship, or how about this ship, or how about this ship, and there'll be a whole list of it. And ultimately, I would sort of look at it and I'd go, okay, yeah, this one feels pretty good to me, or let's do this one. Or I go, well, how about this one, but I want it to be like this, or how about we do something, or sometimes it would be my idea that'd be thrown into the hat. But we would sort of shape it that way, and then once we decided on that, then we go out to start to concept it.
Figuring out who works on what ship, I guess it depends on whether it's internal or external. Their experience depends on what we throw at them, basically. It depends on the risk factor. So there's lots of things that factor into all of these things. So it's, if it's something that's, say, an established manufacturer, and we're totally clear on what it is, and it's not wild and wacky, it's a safer bet, basically. So we may give that to a mid-level, may even give it to a junior, because it's relatively manageable. Not only do I want to get good results and get the project and Chris what he wants, I want to make sure that the artist is comfortable. They start to grow in their skills, and then yeah, they could go, right, yeah, I've done that, I can now move on to something bigger, badder, wilder. With the more senior guys, generally they're more sort of fire and forget.
Whoever the concept artist, we have quite a lot of them in-house now, and originally we were working with quite a few people out-of-house that were great, like Ryan Church or Jim Martin. We still have a few, like Gavin Rothery does a lot of our stuff, and he's brilliant. He's UK based. He's a sort of film conceptual designer as well as doing a lot of our stuff. Usually there's a kind of swatch of sketches that are laid out, and various different shape explorations, a lot of times very basic, and we use that to hone in on the shape that we want, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle, because you're kind of balancing this something that feels familiar, that people go, oh yeah, I totally get that, and then also sometimes you go, well, we don't want to always go for the obvious call for this, and we want to have something that feels different. And so you try to sort of balance the two of them. And the other thing is you also need to keep your identity of the manufacturer there. So they need to, you don't want every ship to kind of be homogeneous and look like it could come from any manufacturer. You want to look at an origin ship and say that's an origin ship, or look at a RSI ship and say that's an RSI ship.
Sometimes it falls to a manufacturer and naturally, depending on what role it's trying to fill.
Sometimes when we come up with a design brief, it screams out that it's a certain manufacturer. Like if you want a cheap and cheerful, rugged thing, that's usually Drake. Or if someone's got an idea of how they want it to look before they really know what it's going to do, that can again influence it in. Military ships tend to be Anvil or Aegis, and as the concepts come through, usually we'll have one manufacturer they want it to be, but quite often that changes once the initial round of concepts come back and we go, actually, that sort of looks better.
And it really just sort of comes down to that. And occasionally you'll have a curveball where you'll start off as one manufacturer and then we'll switch over because it just makes more sense. I think we did that for what did we do that for? I think it was the Terrapin. I think originally it was Aegis, and then it just made more sense to go Anvil because of the sort of the plating and just that sort of that carapace that we had, and it just felt more armoured and kind of worked more with the sort of the sharp sharp lines basically that we have going on for that manufacturer.
Anvil has a fairly angular, like a lot of its canopies are fairly angular, and a lot of its intakes are sort of fairly angular, and it usually has a round kind of dome-like, whether it's a turret or a radar or something like that in it, right? And so you can look at an Anvil ship and say, oh, that's an Anvil ship, whereas you could look at an Origin ship and go, okay, well, you know, that's sort of very sort of elegant and sleek lines, clean, really nice, you know, high-grade materials. And you know, you definitely can see the difference between those two manufacturers. So we have to bake that into the conceptual stage, and I would say that you know, a lot of times the difficulty is coming to like a shape that you feel good with, that people are going to emotionally respond to. You're going to emotionally respond to. They go, yeah, I'd like to, because essentially in all this, you know, if you ask me like on picking these ships out, yes, like I said, there's a certain amount of like design wants this thing, but almost all the time in terms of ship decisions, when I'm involved in it, it's about, would I think that's cool? Do I want to fly that ship? And I mean, I think that's kind of why on the game side, you know, my games in general have connected, is because I view it as me, what I want to do and what I play, and my tastes, I think, align with a lot of everyone that's backed this game, and also you know, general gamers out there. So that's how I view it, is like, yeah, would I be proud to own that? Would I think that's cool? And of course I recognize that, you know, not everyone wants a mining ship, or not everyone wants a combat ship, or whatever like that, but there has to be that sort of emotional kind of wow factor that comes in, the cool factor that comes into a ship. And if you can't get that in at the very early stages, that's when you're sort of having issues with the ship. And so in the early stages, that's kind of what that's, you know, the big thing that when I'm looking at it as it's developing, and you know, usually Paul Jones is giving me, you know, progress updates on the ships. I'm seeing the sketches, how it's developing, and when we're doing that, that's where I'm spending my time going, okay, yeah, this is moving in the right direction, this is cool, or can we get back, or, you know, I feel like I don't know, whatever, you know, the engine nacelles look a bit goofy right now.
And sometimes we'll go in a direction or it'll be pushed in a direction that we think this is what we're after, and it'll go to Chris, and he'll be like, no, it's not this, it's this, and it's just a theoretical, you know, hopefully most of the time it's just a course correction. Sometimes we've had to do complete 180s where we have just got it wrong, but those are quite rare. And it literally is just about communication, isn't it? It's about trying to get it in front of Chris, and him having the time, basically, because everybody knows what Chris is like. You know, he's got his finger on the pulse on everything. So it's just a matter of just squeezing it in and saying, you know, just look at this, just please, you know, we're about to start work on this, so can we have a sign off? There's
always those little changes that come on, as once you see it go from a 2D bit of art on screen to something in game, you always find those little bits that, oh, I didn't notice that from there, or from the 2D thing that looked like it was a 45-degree angle and it should be something extra. So we're always going over things.
And then that's it. I mean, it's you know, Todd's happy with it, Tony Z's happy with it, Chris is happy with it.
Is getting to realize my child and adulthood fantasies live in a game, because the level of detail that we build these, they just feel very real and visceral. And so, you know, one of the funnest things with Star Citizen is there's so many things. I really like this, and I'd like to be flying that kind of, like watching a movie. I'd like to fly that ship. Oh, wouldn't it be so cool to be in the cockpit of that? And I sort of feel like the primal appeal of Star Citizen is very much that. It's living that fantasy or that dream that you had as a kid, reading novels or watching movies or TV, and even as an adult, and in a very real way, because it's so, you know, like we do everything. I mean, you know, you've got beds, you've got toilets, you've got dining tables. You know, it feels real even though it's virtual, and so getting to sort of create that out of thin air and put it into the game and have people fly and enjoy the ships is awesome.